For 6 months, she was invisible to him. Just a maid, nothing more. Until a bodyguard touched her wrist. In that moment, South Korea's most feared mafia boss lost control. He fired the man instantly, locked down the mansion, and said words that changed everything. "You don't touch what's mine." But she isn't his. She's just a maid. Or is she? What happens next will reveal a secret 17 years in the making. Stay until the end to find out why this one woman means everything to a man who has nothing left to lose. If you love intense romance stories, hit that like button and let's begin. The crystal vase shattered against the marble floor before Lena Brooks could even scream. Glass exploded everywhere as 5 armed men stormed through the mansion's grand entrance, their boots thundering against the pristine white tiles she'd spent 3 hours polishing that morning. Lena pressed herself against the hallway wall, her heart hammering so violently she thought it might burst through her chest. The cleaning cloth slipped from her trembling fingers. This was it. After 6 months working in Kang Min-hyun's mansion, she'd finally witnessed what everyone whispered about in the servants' quarters. The violence, the chaos, the darkness that followed South Korea's most feared mafia boss wherever he went. But then something impossible happened. Every single armed man dropped to one knee and bowed their heads. The mansion fell silent except for Lena's ragged breathing. She watched, frozen, as a figure emerged from the shadows of the entrance. Tall, impossibly tall. His black suit was cut so perfectly it looked like darkness itself had been tailored to fit his frame. Kang Min-hyun moved through the bowing men like a king inspecting his soldiers, his footsteps measured and deliberate. Each step echoed through the cavernous hallway with the weight of absolute authority. Lena had seen him before, of course. You couldn't work in someone's home for 6 months without seeing them. But she'd never been this close. Never felt the strange pressure that seemed to radiate from him like invisible waves. The bright afternoon sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows seemed to dim as he passed beneath them, as if the light itself was afraid to touch him. He walked right past her, didn't even glance in her direction. To Kang Min-hyun, Lena Brooks might as well have been another piece of furniture, another decorative element in his carefully controlled world. She was nothing, nobody, just the black American girl who cleaned his floors and arranged his flowers and made sure his mansion sparkled like a diamond every single day. But as he disappeared up the grand staircase, Lena felt something that made her skin prickle with an inexplicable awareness. The air where he'd stood still felt charged, electric, dangerous, like standing too close to a sleeping tiger and hoping it wouldn't wake. 3 weeks later, everything changed. Lena was arranging white orchids in the East Wing reception room when she felt someone watching her. The morning sun poured through the windows, painting everything in shades of gold and cream. It should have felt safe, peaceful, but her instincts screamed warning. "Those are beautiful," a smooth voice said behind her. She spun around and found herself face to face with a man she'd never seen before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, devastatingly handsome, in the way that dangerous men often were. His smile was easy and confident, too confident, the kind of smile that said he'd never been told no in his entire life. "I'm sorry, sir, I didn't know anyone was—" Lena started, but he waved her words away with a casual flick of his hand. "Don't apologize. I'm the one interrupting." He stepped closer, invading her space with the casual entitlement of someone who believed the world belonged to him. "I'm the new head of security. Started today." Lena nodded politely and turned back to the flowers, hoping he'd take the hint and leave. But he didn't leave. He moved closer instead, so close she could smell his expensive cologne, mixing with the orchid's delicate fragrance. "You have very gentle hands," he murmured, and before Lena could process what was happening, his fingers brushed across her wrist. The touch was light, barely there, just a whisper of skin against skin. But the reaction was cataclysmic. A presence materialized at the top of the grand staircase, overlooking the reception room. Lena's head snapped up, and her breath caught in her throat. Kang Min-hyun stood there like a statue carved from ice and fury, his dark eyes locked onto the exact spot where the bodyguard's fingers touched her wrist. Everything stopped. The temperature in the room seemed to plummet despite the warm sunlight. The bodyguard jerked his hand back as if Lena's skin had suddenly become white-hot metal, his confident smile evaporating like morning mist. Lena stood frozen, the orchid stem still clutched in her trembling fingers, unable to look away from the man on the stairs. Kang Min-hyun's face remained perfectly blank. Not a single muscle moved. But his eyes, God, his eyes, burned with something that made Lena's stomach twist into knots. It wasn't anger exactly. It was colder than anger, more terrifying, like looking into the eyes of something ancient and primal that existed beyond human emotion. He descended the stairs slowly. Each step rang out like a judge's gavel. Each footfall seemed to make the lights overhead burn brighter and harsher until the warm golden glow transformed into something almost clinical, surgical, the kind of light that revealed every flaw and shadow. "Who touched you?" His voice was quiet, so quiet that Lena had to strain to hear it. But the quietness made it more terrifying, not less, like the calm before a hurricane tears the world apart. Lena's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her mind reeled with confusion. In 6 months, Kang Min-hyun had never spoken to her, never acknowledged her existence. She was invisible to him, a ghost haunting the corners of his mansion. So why was he looking at her now like she was the only person in the entire world? "Sir, I was just—" the bodyguard started, his voice cracking with sudden fear. "I didn't ask you." Min-hyun's gaze never left Lena's face. "I asked her." The words hung in the air like a blade. Lena forced herself to swallow past the lump in her throat. He just brushed my wrist, sir. It was nothing. An accident." "An accident." Min-hyun repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them, testing their validity. His jaw locked tight enough that Lena could see the muscle jump beneath his skin. Then he finally looked at the bodyguard. The shift in his attention was like watching a predator select its prey. "You're fired." The words dropped like stones into still water. The bodyguard's face went white. "Sir, I didn't mean any disrespect. I was just—" "Get out of my house." Min-hyun's voice remained that same terrifying quiet. "You have 60 seconds to leave this property. If I see you here after that, you won't leave on your own feet." The bodyguard looked around desperately, as if searching for someone to intervene. But the other staff members who'd gathered in the hallway had already melted away like shadows at dawn. Nobody challenged Kang Min-hyun, nobody questioned him, nobody survived doing so. "Sir, please, I need this job. I have 45 seconds. The bodyguard actually ran, stumbling over his own feet in his haste to escape. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the mansion and then faded entirely, leaving behind a silence so complete that Lena could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Min-hyun stood there for a long moment, his dark eyes still fixed on the spot where the bodyguard had touched her. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. But Lena noticed something that made her breath catch. As he passed through the pool of sunlight near the windows, the light seemed to flicker and dim, following him like a living shadow. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in her small room in the servants' wing, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of what had happened. The man had barely touched her. A brush of fingers, nothing more. Why had Min-hyun reacted like that? Why had he looked at her with such intensity, such focus, when he'd spent 6 months treating her like she was invisible? The questions chased each other through her mind until dawn crept across the sky. Over the next week, everything changed in ways that made Lena's skin crawl with unease. New guards appeared outside the mansion. Not inside where they usually were, but outside. Watching. Waiting. And Lena slowly realized with growing horror that they weren't watching the perimeter. They were watching her. When she went to the market to buy fresh flowers, 2 guards followed at a distance. When she took her evening walk through the gardens, someone was always there, lurking in the shadows. When she tried to leave through the side gate one afternoon, a guard stepped out and informed her politely but firmly that she needed to stay on the property after dark. "Boss's orders," he said, not meeting her eyes. Lena felt panic rising in her chest like floodwater. "I don't understand. What orders? Why can't I leave?" The guard shifted uncomfortably. "For your protection, miss." "Protection from what?" He didn't answer, just stood there like a wall, immovable and silent. Lena stormed back into the mansion, her hands shaking with anger and fear. This was insane. She wasn't a prisoner. She was an employee. She had rights. She could quit. She could leave. She could... "You seem upset." Lena whirled around and found herself face to face with Kang Min-hyun. He'd appeared out of nowhere, silent as a ghost, standing in the kitchen doorway with his hands in his pockets. The evening light streaming through the windows painted him in shades of amber and shadow, making him look less human and more like something carved from darkness itself. "Your guards won't let me leave," Lena said, trying to keep her voice steady. "They say it's for my protection. But I don't need protection. I need to be able to go where I want, when I want." Min-hyun studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "It's dangerous out there. It's always been dangerous out there. I've been taking care of myself for 24 years. Not anymore." The words hung between them like a challenge. Lena felt her temper flare hot and bright. "Excuse me? You work for me now. That makes you my responsibility." His voice remained calm, measured, but there was something underneath it, something that made the hair on the back of Lena's neck stand up. "And I protect what's mine." "I'm not yours," Lena snapped before she could stop herself. "I'm your employee. There's a difference." Something flickered in Min-hyun's dark eyes, something that might have been amusement, or might have been something far more dangerous. "Is there?" He moved closer, each step deliberate and controlled. Lena wanted to back away, but pride kept her rooted in place. She wouldn't show fear, wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her retreat. "Let me make something clear, Miss Brooks." He stopped just close enough that Lena had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "You are not to walk alone at night. You are not to speak with men I haven't vetted personally. You are not to leave this property without my permission. These rules are not negotiable." "You can't do this," Lena whispered, her voice cracking despite her best efforts. "You can't just lock me up like some kind of prisoner." "I'm not locking you up." His voice softened slightly, but the intensity in his eyes never wavered. "I'm keeping you safe." "From what?" "From everything." Before Lena could respond, before she could demand a real explanation, Min-hyun turned and walked away, and once again, she watched the light seem to dim in his wake, as if he carried his own personal darkness with him wherever he went. 2 days later, Han Soo-jin arrived. Lena was dusting the library when she heard voices in the entrance hall. Bright midday sunlight flooded through the tall windows, making the mahogany shelves glow like honey. Everything felt normal, safe. But the moment she heard the newcomer's voice, smooth and charming, and entirely too friendly, something in her gut twisted with warning. "Min-hyun, it's been too long, my friend." Lena peered around the bookshelf and saw a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, tall, impeccably dressed, with the kind of smile that could sell anything to anyone. He embraced Min-hyun like they were old friends, but Lena noticed how Min-hyun's body remained rigid, unyielding. "Soo-jin." Min-hyun's voice carried no warmth. "I wasn't expecting you." I know. I should have called." Soo-jin laughed, easy and relaxed. "But I was in the neighborhood and thought, why not drop by and see how my favorite rival is doing?" Rival. The word hung in the air with weight and meaning. Lena shrank back behind the bookshelf, her heart racing. She shouldn't be listening to this, shouldn't be here at all. But before she could slip away, Sujin's gaze swept across the library and locked onto her. His smile widened. "Well, well, who do we have here?" Lena froze, the duster still clutched in her hand. Sujin moved toward her with the easy confidence of a man who'd never been denied anything in his life. Min-hyun's body went rigid, but Sujin either didn't notice or didn't care. "I'm just the maid, sir," Lena said quickly, trying to step back, but the bookshelf blocked her retreat. "Just the maid?" Sujin's eyes sparkled with something that made Lena's stomach turn. "I find that hard to believe. Min-hyun has always had impeccable taste in everything, including his staff." He reached up, his fingers moving toward her hair. "You have something just here." His fingertips brushed against her hair, barely touching, just pretending to remove dust that wasn't there. The lights flickered. Actually flickered, like something had disrupted the electrical current running through the entire mansion. Lena's breath caught as she watched Min-hyun's face transform. The careful control he always maintained shattered like glass. His eyes went black with rage, his jaw clenched so tight she thought his teeth might crack. "Get your hand away from her!" Min-hyun's voice wasn't quiet anymore. It was low and deadly, vibrating with barely contained violence. "Now!" Sujin's hand dropped slowly, but his smile never wavered. "My apologies, I was just being helpful. You can insult me." Min-hyun moved forward, each step measured and dangerous. The bright sunlight streaming through the windows seemed to darken around him, as if shadows were bleeding from his very skin. "You can come into my home uninvited. You can question my business decisions. But you don't. You will never lay a finger on what's mine." There it was again. That word. Mine. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed herself against the bookshelf, watching these two dangerous men face off over her like she was a prize to be won. Sujin raised his hands in mock surrender, but his eyes gleamed with triumph. "Yours? I didn't realize you'd claimed her. My mistake, Min-hyun. I should have known better. Get out. I'm leaving. I'm leaving." Sujin backed toward the door, but his gaze flicked to Lena one more time. "It was lovely to meet you, miss. I'm sure we'll see each other again very soon." The threat in those words was clear. Lena felt it like ice water down her spine. The moment Sujin disappeared through the front entrance, she tried to slip past Min-hyun, but his hand shot out and caught her wrist. Not hard, not painful, but inescapable. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "I need to get back to work." "The work can wait." He released her wrist but didn't move, effectively blocking her exit. "You need to understand something about Han Soo-jin. He's not what he appears to be." "Neither are you," Lena shot back, her fear finally transmuting into anger. "You keep saying I'm yours, but you won't tell me why. You lock me in this mansion, you follow me everywhere, you fire people for touching me, and you won't explain anything. I deserve to know what's happening." Min-hyun stared at her for a long moment, and for the first time since she'd met him, Lena saw something crack in his armor, something that looked almost like pain. "You're right," he said finally. "Come with me." He led her to his private office, a room Lena had never been allowed to enter. The walls were lined with dark wood, and the windows overlooked the gardens. But what caught Lena's attention was the file sitting open on his desk. A file with her name on it. Her blood ran cold. "What is that?" Min-hyun picked up the file and held it out to her. "The truth." With trembling hands, Lena opened it. Inside were photos, old photos. A younger version of herself, maybe 7 or 8 years old, standing beside her mother outside a hospital. Her mother in her nurse's scrubs, smiling at the camera. And in the background, barely visible, a small boy with dark eyes watching them. "I don't understand," Lena whispered. 17 years ago I was in that hospital." Min-hyun's voice was quiet, almost gentle. I'd been shot, left for dead by people who wanted to send a message to my family. Your mother found me in an alley and brought me to the emergency room. She stayed with me through the surgery, held my hand when I was terrified, told me stories to keep me conscious. Lena's hands shook as she flipped through more pages. Medical records, hospital bills marked paid in full, school tuition receipts, her college expenses, all of it paid by anonymous benefactors. All of it paid by him. She saved my life, Min-hyun continued. And when she died 3 years later, I made a promise to myself that I would watch over her daughter, that I would make sure you had everything you needed. A good education, safety, a future. Tears blurred Lena's vision. You've been protecting me this whole time? From a distance, always from a distance. His jaw tightened. Until you walked into my house 6 months ago, applying for a position as a maid. I should have sent you away, should have kept my distance, but I was selfish. I wanted you close, wanted to see with my own eyes that you were safe and healthy and alive. So you hired me. I hired you, and I told myself I could maintain the distance, that I could protect you without... He trailed off, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration that looked entirely foreign on him. Without this. Without what? Min-hyun looked at her then, really looked at her, and Lena saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Something raw and vulnerable and terrifying in its intensity. Without wanting you the way I want you now. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. The moment that bodyguard touched you, something inside me snapped. I've spent 17 years protecting you from everyone else, but I never thought I'd need to protect you from myself. The confession hung between them like a living thing. Lena's mind reeled, trying to process everything, the protection, the obsession, the way he looked at her like she was both salvation and destruction wrapped in human skin. Sujin knows, she said suddenly, understanding flooding through her. That's why he touched me. He knows I'm your weakness. Yes. Min-hyun's face hardened. Which is why you need to stay close to me now. Not as a prisoner, Lena. As someone He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. As someone I care about. Someone I can't lose. You barely know me. I've known you since you were 7 years old. I've watched you grow up from a distance, seen you graduate high school, get accepted to college, struggle through finals, cry over heartbreak. His voice cracked slightly. I know you take your coffee with too much cream, that you hum when you arrange flowers, that you call your grandmother every Sunday morning. I know you, Lena, better than you might think. It should have felt creepy, invasive, wrong. But something in the way he said it, the raw honesty in his voice, made Lena's heart clench instead. This wasn't just obsession. It was devotion, twisted and complicated, and maybe a little broken, but real nonetheless. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now, Sujin will try to use you against me. He'll try to take you, hurt you, break me by breaking you. Min-hyun moved closer, his dark eyes burning with intensity. But I won't let that happen. I'll burn the entire city to the ground before I let anyone hurt you. That's not an answer. That's a threat. It's a promise. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her cheek with surprising gentleness. You asked me what happens now. Here's the truth. You can leave. I'll set you up somewhere safe. Somewhere far from this world. I'll protect you from a distance like I've always done. Or you can stay. And let me protect you the way I should have been protecting you all along. Up close. Where I can see you. Where I know you're safe. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Where you're mine. Not as a possession, but as someone I choose. And who chooses me back. Lena's heart thundered in her chest. Every rational part of her brain screamed to run. to get as far away from this dangerous, obsessive man as possible. But her heart, her traitorous heart, remembered the little boy in those hospital photos, remembered her mother's stories about the scared child she'd comforted, saw the man before her not as a monster, but as someone who'd spent 17 years honoring a debt to a dead woman by protecting her daughter. "I need time," she whispered. "This is too much, too fast. Take all the time you need." Min-hyun's hand dropped away from her face, but his eyes never left hers. "But know this, whether you choose to stay or go, whether you accept this or reject it, I will never stop protecting you, never stop watching over you. Because you're not just a debt I'm repaying. Lena, you stopped being that the moment I saw you again after all these years. Then what am I?" He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his entire face, soft and warm, and so unexpected that Lena forgot to breathe. "You're the only light in my darkness," he said simply. "The only good thing in a world that taught me to trust nothing and expect betrayal from everyone. You're the girl who reminded me, every single day for 17 years, that kindness exists, that mercy is real, that some people save lives instead of taking them." The words wrapped around Lena's heart like silk ribbons, beautiful and binding. She stood there in the bright sunlight streaming through the office windows, looking at a man who carried darkness wherever he went, and realized something that should have terrified her, but didn't. She believed him. And more than that, impossibly, dangerously, completely, she was starting to feel the same way. And that's how a single touch revealed 17 years of hidden protection and obsession. So what do you think? Was Min-hyun's love romantic or too dangerous? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more intense romance tales. And check out the next video for another story of forbidden love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.